Macallan 12 and Glenfiddich 12 are the two scotches you will find in every liquor store on the planet. They are on every gift guide, every best scotch for beginners list, and every airport duty-free shelf. And they are fine. But fine is not what you should be spending $65 on when there are bottles on the same shelf that deliver twice the flavour for the same money or less. These are 12 scotches that are genuinely better than Macallan or Glenfiddich. Before we get into the list, data from this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. If you care about finding better whiskey for your money, hit subscribe. It is free and it takes 1 second. Number 12, Anoch 12, pronounced Anoch, priced around $35 to $45. The distillery is actually called Knockdo, but they changed the brand name because people kept confusing it with Knockando, a completely different Speyside distillery. That confusion turned out to be a gift because it means this bottle flies under the radar while delivering a Highland single malt with real character. Knockdo was built in 1894 after its founder John Morrison discovered springs of pure water running down Knock Hill. The distillery still draws from those same springs today. The 12-year-old gives you honeycomb, lemon zest and gentle spice with a clean barley backbone that Glenfiddich 12 wishes it had. The finish has a pleasant warmth with hints of white pepper and vanilla that lingers far longer than you would expect at this price. At around $40, this is one of the cheapest ways to beat both Macallan and Glenfiddich in a blind tasting, offering serious value for the money. Number 11, Old Ptony, $35 to $50. This comes from one of Scotland's most northerly mainland distilleries, sitting right in the harbour of Wick, a town that was once the herring capital of Europe. The warehouses face directly into the North Sea, and the whiskey absorbs that coastal character during its 12 years in ex-bourbon casks. You get honey, toffee, and a distinctive salty brininess that makes it taste like no other scotch on the shelf. At 40%, it is not the boldest dram on this list, but the maritime personality is something neither Macallan nor Glenfiddich can touch. And at $35 in some markets, it is almost half the price of Macallan 12. Number 10, Altmore 12, priced at around $45 to $55. Altmore's nickname is a wee dram of foggy moss, named after the misty peatland that surrounds the distillery in Keith, Speyside. For over a century, nearly all of its production disappeared into blends, primarily feeding into dewars. The single malt bottling is relatively new, and because nobody has heard of it, you can still find it sitting quietly on shelves at a price that makes no sense for the quality inside. The distillery was founded in 1897 and rebuilt in 1971, and it uses long fermentation times that give the spirit a distinctly grassy, meadow-like character you rarely find in Speyside. Crisp green apple, meadowgrass, heather honey, and a clean minerality that feels almost spring water fresh. If Glenfiddich 12 is the whiteboard of Scotch, Altmore 12 is a watercolour painting at the same price, and it represents serious value. Number 9, GlenKadam 10, around $40 to $50. The distillery calls itself the rather elegant, and that is not marketing. It is just accurate. GlenKadam sits in the town of Brecon on Scotland's east coast, and for years it was one of those places where almost all the spirit went to blending houses. The distillery was founded in 1825 and has changed hands several times, but the character of the spirit has remained remarkably consistent through every ownership change. They use copper pot stills with line arms angled upward instead of the typical downward slope, which encourages reflux and produces a lighter, more refined spirit than the typical Highland malt. The 10-year-old single malt is a revelation if you have never tried it. Delicate floral notes, ripe pear, vanilla, and a creamy mouthfeel that finishes clean and long. Where Glenfiddich 12 fades to nothing after 5 seconds, GlenKadam lingers with you. It is the kind of bottle that makes you sit quietly for a minute after your first sip. Number 8. Glengoyne 12, around $45 to $55. Glengoyne is one of the very few Scottish distilleries that insists on dried barley and zero peat influence. Where other distilleries use peat smoke during the malting process, Glengoyne slow dries its barley over warm air only, and that takes significantly longer than a standard kiln process. The result is a whiskey where you taste nothing but the pure malt and the cask influence. The distillery also runs the slowest distillation in Scotland, taking its time to produce a spirit that is rich, toffee-sweet, and layered with baked apple and cinnamon. It sits on the border between the Highlands and the Lowlands, with the distillery on the Highland side and the warehouses across the road in the Lowlands. Number 7. Blairmore 12, around $55 to $65. Blairmore used to release their whiskies as vintages instead of age statements, which was unusual and frankly a better system. They switched to standard age statements a few years ago, but the quality stayed the same. Founded in 1790, this is one of the oldest distilleries in the Highlands, located in the village of Ederton, overlooking the Anoch Firth. If the name sounds familiar outside of whiskey, it might be because the distillery doubled as a film location for Ken Loach's movie The Angel's Share. The 12-year-old is matured in a combination of ex-bourbon American oak and Oloroso sherry casks, giving you layers of honey, dried apricot, vanilla, and a gentle spice that builds over a long finish. There is a waxy, almost tropical quality to the texture that catches you off guard for a Highland malt. It has a weight and complexity that Macallan 12 simply does not deliver at a similar price point. Number 6. Tobbery 12, around $55 to $70. Tobbery is the only distillery on the Isle of Mull, founded in 1798 in the colourful harbour town that shares its name. If you have ever seen photos of that row of brightly painted buildings along a Scottish waterfront, that is Tobbery, and the distillery sits right among them. The same distillery produces two completely different whiskies. The unpeated version is called Tobbery, and the heavily peated version is called Glenfiddich, which uses barley peated to around 30 to 40 parts per million. The 12-year-old Tobbery is the unpeated expression, matured in American oak ex-bourbon casks for 12 years, creating a whiskey with a clean, fruit-forward character and genuine island personality. Notes of pear, peach, and stone fruit, with a subtle maritime note that reminds you this whiskey aged surrounded by the Atlantic. It also comes bottled at 46.3%, non-chill filtered, so unlike Macallan 12 at 40%, nothing has been stripped from this bottle to make it look pretty on a shelf. Number 5. Arran 10, around $45 to $55. This is the bottle that the whiskey community has been quietly obsessing over for the past few years. The Isle of Arran distillery opened in 1995, making it one of Scotland's youngest. The 10-year-old has won Best Value Single Malt at the Online Scotch Whisky Awards 3 years running. It also took gold at the 2025 San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered and natural colour, nothing has been stripped out or artificially added. For the same price as Glenfiddich 12, you get a whiskey that is bolder, more complex, and actually tastes like someone cared about what went into the bottle. Citrus, vanilla, honey, and apple, with an oily, creamy texture that Glenfiddich cannot touch at 40%. If you are getting value from this list, do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey content every week, and the next video on this channel might save you $100 on your next bottle. Now let us keep going, because these last 4 are where it gets serious. Number 4. Tambu 12, around $55 to $75. Here is the story that should make every Macallan buyer furious. Tambu used to be owned by Edrington, the same company that owns Macallan. For decades they used Tambu whiskey as blending stock and never bothered promoting it as a single malt. When Ian MacLeod Distillers bought the distillery in 2011, they relaunched it with a focus on 100% Oloroso sherry cask maturation. This is the same approach Macallan built its reputation on. Whiskey reviewers now regularly describe Tambu 12 as what Macallan used to be, before it became a luxury brand focused on packaging over liquid. Tasting notes include cinnamon rolls, orange candy, raisins, and toasted oak. It sells for 30 to 50% less than Macallan 12, and it comes from the former property of Macallan's own parent company. Let that comparison speak for itself. Number 3. Kilkeran 12, priced around $60 to $80. Kilkeran is produced at Glengoyne Distillery in Campbelltown, which sat abandoned for nearly 80 years before being revived in 2004. The distillery originally closed in 1925 during the Great Collapse that wiped out most of Campbelltown's whisky industry. At its peak in the late 1800s, Campbelltown had over 30 working distilleries crammed into a single town. By the 1930s, only 2 survived. When Glengoyne reopened, they could not use the original Glengoyne name for the whisky because it was already trademarked by another distillery, so they named it Kilkeran after the old Gaelic name for Campbelltown. The revival was led by the Mitchell family, the same family that owns Springbank just down the road. Bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered and natural colour. The whisky delivers a combination of orchard fruit, vanilla, maritime salt, and a gentle, oily texture that coats the palate. It shares DNA with Springbank in the sense that Campbelltown malts have a character you simply cannot replicate anywhere else in Scotland. For anyone who has never tried a Campbelltown Scotch, this is the bottle to start with. Number 2. Springbank. 10. Around $80 to $100. There is no distillery in Scotland quite like Springbank. They do everything in-house: malting, mashing, fermenting, distilling, maturing and bottling, all on the same site in the town of Campbelltown. They have operated since 1828, and the Mitchell family has owned it since 1837, making it Scotland's oldest continuously family-owned distillery. The 10-year-old is their flagship, lightly peated with barley dried in their own kiln, then distilled 2.5 times through their unique still setup. That 2.5 times distillation is not a marketing gimmick. It means the spirit runs through the wash still once, then the low wine still once, but only a portion of the spirit goes through the final spirit still. It creates a layered, complex character that a standard double or triple distillation cannot achieve. Bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered natural colour. The result is a whisky with layers of honeycomb, orchard fruit, marzipan, and a wisp of maritime smoke that builds through a long, sweet, salty finish. Whisky enthusiasts treat Springbank with an almost religious devotion, and after your first glass you will understand why. It costs more than Macallan 12, and it is worth every single penny of the difference. Number 1. Aberlour Arbuna. Around $90 to $110. Aberlour has been making whisky in Speyside since 1879, and Arbunad is their masterpiece. The name means the original in Gaelic. The whisky was inspired by a time capsule discovered at the distillery in 1975. During the installation of 2 new stills, workers found a bottle of Aberlour with a newspaper from 1898 wrapped around it. Arbunad is an attempt to recreate that style of whisky from a time when Scotch was bottled straight from the cask without dilution or filtration. Every batch is matured exclusively in first fill Oloroso sherry butts from Spain, with 0 bourbon casks and 0 refill casks in the recipe. First fill sherry only. It is bottled at cask strength, which typically lands around 60%, and it is non-chill filtered with no colouring added. Each release carries a unique batch number, and the series has been running since 1997. The tasting experience is intense. Dark chocolate, Christmas cake, raisins, orange peel, cinnamon, and a creamy mouthfeel that coats every corner of your palate. Some batches lean fruity, some lean spicy, but every single one delivers a sherry experience that Macallan 12 cannot begin to approach. Yes, it costs more. But where Macallan 12 gives you a whisper of sherry through a thin, filtered 40% dram, Arbunad gives you the full orchestra at cask strength. This is the bottle that makes you realise Macallan is charging for the name, not the whisky. If you found value in this video, consider subscribing, and we will see you in the next one.